Karl Rove is standing by, and we have so much to talk to him about. Let's get to the big three.
Number 3.
Conversations between Putin and Trump may be important for their bilateral, but they cannot agree on anything about Ukraine without us.
That is true, President Zelensky. 2 days into the Alaska summit with Vlad and 1 day into the interview with our show. I'm talking about President Trump, not Putin. And what Russia and U.S. can expect to get out of this headline-grabbing, I guess, summit?
Number 2.
What this tour is reflective of is the fact that Donald Trump is attacking this city. It's attacking its people. It's attacking the very fabric of what we call home. This is a tour against the Trump administration's attack on New York City voters.
Zoran Mamdani, New York mayor race, a national event as Mamdani drops the gloves on Trump and Cuomo as copycats emerge around the country and threaten to marginalize the Democrats' Big Tent party.
Number 1.
If he can get away with this in Los Angeles, if he can get away with this in D.C., it is a step in fascism when the federal government can Bigfoot sovereign states.
Believe me, Mayor Bowser, D.C. crackdown goes into motion. 800 National Guards, over 100 FBI agents flood the nation's capital, and other crime-ridden cities can brace possibly for some help, although they don't seem to want it. Karl Rove, former deputy of staff for George W. Bush, senior advisor there, Fox News contributor, best-selling author. Karl, what do you think about the president's crime attack plan?
Well, look, we saw a little bit of this in Los Angeles where there were, disturbances. He has special authorities that allow him to, for a limited period of time, to control the Metropolitan Police Department in Washington, D.C.
30 days, right?
30 days under the home rule law. It's not clear to me that he has authority to deploy federal forces and National Guard into the other cities just because he believes that the crime rates there are too high. It's one thing going back to, remember in Portland several years ago when left-wing demonstrators were trying to attack the federal courthouse, that he would have authority under federal law to deploy federal forces in order to stop that. And they did send additional federal law enforcement there, but he would have authority to do things in a situation like that. It's unclear what authority he would have to deal with crime in Oakland or Philadelphia or Baltimore, as opposed to Washington, D.C., which is, has a special district that has governed by a specific law that gives him specific authority for 30 days to basically take command of the Metropolitan Police Department.
The most deceptive thing, and Ari Fleischer talked about it last night, is everyone says, well, crime's down, why now? Well, there's little things that are going on when it comes to crime figures. The thing that emerged yesterday out of the D.C. figures, they left off felony and aggravated assaults in their violent crime categories. Also, they have a little problem with the Metropolitan Police. They suspended one of their guys for skewing the crime stats. So he's suspended with pay. So, You got to wonder. And plus, Karl, more people in Washington than almost anybody. They don't feel safe like they used to.
Yeah, no, they don't. Having said that, remember, this was not a response by the administration to a judicious study of the crime statistics and finding fault with them. This was a brutal assault on a former DOJ employee at 3 a.m. in the morning. With what turns out to be pretty typical in the last couple of years. He is assaulted by 3 individuals who are attempting to steal his car, and I believe they're all underage. What we've got in Washington, D.C. is because of D.C. laws passed by the city council, they treat juvenile defendants in violent acts significantly different than they do adults in those acts. So what happens? The gangs go out and say, we're going to get the 14 and the 15-year-old to basically steal the luxury car at 1 a.m. And so, this is a little bit of the D.C. having to deal with a problem that it created by being lax on crime.
Absolutely, especially with teens. So I'm watching the mayor of Baltimore, and you know what a mess Baltimore is, how dangerous it is. The mayor of Baltimore, obviously a Democrat, who thought it would be a great idea just to not wear a tie or a jacket, just hop on CNN. I just think it's a bad presentation. Having said that, the Baltimore Sun did a story about how bad things are using real people, talking about how bad things are in Baltimore. So he was confronted with this, and if Trump could help. Cut 22.
I'm sure you read the article in the Baltimore Sun yesterday talking about how so many Baltimore residents don't recognize their neighborhoods anymore. What do you say to those residents of Baltimore who may think that citing falling crime statistics glosses over some of the harsher day-to-day realities and needs that they have to their lives in Baltimore, need for things to change even further in terms of just regular drug trafficking?
Yeah, so we're only having that discussion because the president is having that discussion. And this, I want to be very clear. I didn't read the Baltimore Sun article. I don't read it because they're a part of the president's propaganda machine.
Really? Baltimore Sun? Is that the answer you expect?
God, what a moron. I'm sorry. That's just ridiculous. Look, this is a big problem for the Democratic Party because most big city mayors are Democrats. You know, Dallas has a Republican mayor, Fort Worth has a Republican mayor, but those are the largest cities in America with Republican mayors. And most of these other city mayors are big city mayors are Democrats. And if they are soft on crime, that's the face of the Democratic Party. Look, I'm old enough to remember when you had Democrats who felt seriously about making certain that the inner city neighborhoods were safe. And this guy, that's a joke.
I know.
I mean, how out of touch is he? The Democratic Party, if it would wake up, would realize that saying we're going to make certain that the neighborhoods and communities inside our big cities are safe, that would be something that would put them in good stead with the voters back home, but also help change the view that we have in America today that the Democratic Party, when it comes to crime, is soft. And they are.
So I want to talk about gerrymandering. The ABC had a report last night that some Democratic lawmakers, state lawmakers, were coming home so you could have a quorum today about redistricting in your state, Karl Rove. What have you heard?
Well, look, 9 Democrats never left the state, and I understand there's a 10th one whose name has not been added to the list, who's around town. They need to have 12 Democrats join with the 88 Republicans in order to have 100 members present out of 150. That would constitute a quorum. We have a very high threshold for what a quorum consists of. But look, I don't think this is going to happen before the end of this first called session. I think the governor's going to have to call a second one. But look, they're going to come home. First of all, this always happens. They run away, but eventually they have to come home because look. First of all, they only get paid $600 a month, which means each one of these people has a real job they're staying away from, and their families. And second of all, the Speaker Burrows has taken some very tough, smart measures. He said, okay, if you want to get your paycheck, and more importantly, if you want to get your per diem, we only pay them $600 a month, but we pay a nice per diem while they're in session. If you want to pick up either one of if you want to receive either of those checks, we're no longer making auto deposit into your account. You got to pick them up in person. And then he said, any member who is not here, we're going to cut your staff budget by 30%, which means every one of these people is going to have to fire an employee, and they only have 2 or 3 employees. This is going to be so he's pinching them. So look, this is going to happen. It's probably going to take a second special called session. This one ends legally on the 19th. The governor can literally call a session to begin immediately. What's going to happen is we'll end up with 100 members. The speaker will put on what's called a call. He'll put a call on the House, which means that literally no member can leave the floor of the House without his written permission. And we'll end up doing, the redistricting plan, and we'll end up doing some of the bills that have been added onto the special call to deal with the aftermath of the Guadalupe River flood.
And here is the backlash from Gavin Newsom. Listen.
Hey, President Trump, it's time to stand down. It's time to, dare I say, do the right thing. Actually see how that feels for you, doing the right thing. If you don't, California will neutralize anything you do in the state of Texas. We're not going to sit back and watch you light democracy on fire. We will fight fire with fire.
Take that apart, if you will, Karl.
Don't do something that I consider to be anti-democratic, namely gerrymandering. I've already done it in California, so don't criticize me or the Illinois governor or the New York governor for having gerrymandered their states. Texas, 2/3 of the delegation are Republicans. In California, it is 83% of the delegation are Democrats. So I've already gerrymandered, he says, and if you gerrymander in Texas, well, I'm going to do a second round of gerrymandering, and it's all because you're being anti-democratic. Well, what do you call gerrymandering your state? In fact, I loved it. They had a commission draw the lines, and after they drew the lines, all these special interest groups said, look at how we manipulated the process so that we would have more Democrats in the congressional delegation. I mean, come on, please stop being a hypocrite. Stop. Do I wish that we only redistricted every 12 years? Am I uncomfortable with the degrees to which both parties go? Yes. Do I wish more states were like Iowa, where they draw their lines in such a way that they're compact and contiguous and community of interest and have more competitive seats? Yes. But this is what it is, and it's been this way since before the term gerrymandering was created in 1812. So stop, please, Newsom. Stop lecturing us like you are high and mighty, and you realize that you're doing something bad, Donald Trump, so therefore I'm going to do something even worse.
You think Florida's going to do the same thing? I think they're heading down that way.
We'll see. I mean, it's at some point this just gets crazy, and look, let me just be clear. Everybody does this. I remember in 2015, and 2016, when the Attorney General of the United States, Eric Holder, directed 4 states that they had to redo their redistricting in the middle of the decade in order to create more black majority seats, and it cost Republican seats in most of those states. The 2 Republicans lost their seats in North Carolina because of the Justice Department stepping in and saying, you must do this, and you must do it in a way that will guarantee more Democratic seats. So everybody does this. Do I like it? No. But please, let's not go out there and have holier than thou lectures from a guy who's got great hair. I have to admit that about Newsom, great hair, but not a particularly effective governor.
Terrible governor, and not sincere about a word he says. He comes off totally distrustful. And I know people that are sincere, even if you don't believe anything, and you go, well, he's sincere. And maybe Governor Wes Moore's like that. I don't see it in Gavin Newsom. I see nothing but distrust. And in California, he's got 38% approval rating, and that's a Democrat. Not easy. So finally, Karl, I want to bring you to what you expect to happen in this unorthodox setup in Anchorage, Alaska. It looks like we now know that the Vladimir Putin will meet with Donald Trump at a U.S. military base in Anchorage. Your thoughts about what we'll be talking about Friday night when it's over?
Well, we don't know, and maybe we shouldn't, because this is, high stakes. This will determine, this could determine the outcome of the conflict in Ukraine, and it could either be to the advantage of the United States and the West, or it could be to the advantage of Vladimir Putin and to the disadvantage of the United States over the long haul, and to Europe almost immediately. So we don't know. I do think that there are signs that President Trump has come to understand that Vladimir Putin is not sincere about wanting to have peace. He wants what he wants, which is the decimation of Ukraine and the creation of a vassal state in Ukraine, and the end of its freedom, and the beginning of domination by Moscow. But we'll see what happens. But this is one for the history books. This is going to be a moment where Donald Trump demonstrates leadership or not, and where either the United States is a force for peace and security and our interests or not. And we'll see. High stakes.
This meeting came about because the president of Russia asked the president of the United States to meet through his special envoy, Steve Witkoff, who, as you all know, traveled to Russia to have a conversation with Putin at his request. And so the president is agreeing to this meeting at the request of President Putin. And the goal of this meeting for the president is to walk away with a better understanding of how we can end this war.
So you read between the lines there. They're kind of walking back expectations and let everybody know why this is happening, right?
Smart. Lower the expectations, because the expectations got way out of whack very quickly. And Russia wanted that. Russia wants the pressure to be on Donald Trump to, quote, deliver and deliver a peace regardless of what the consequences of that might be over the short term or long term. And I thought it was very wise by the White House to begin to lower the expectations on it and to say the president wants to hear from Putin and understand where he's coming from. But look, to a large degree, we know that. He had, this is a guy who said, think about what he proposed. Putin said, I want the rest of the Donbass. I want territory that I didn't already illegally invade and occupy. I want the rest of it. And then I'm willing to give you a ceasefire, which is, gives me time to rebuild my military so I can take the rest of Ukraine. And I don't offer security guarantees. I want you to take NATO off the NATO membership off the board. I mean, everything for Russia, nothing for Ukraine.
That's why if he walks in with that, this things will be over in 20 minutes, especially if he doesn't want to budge.
So.
Karl Rove, thanks so much. Right. Fascinating times. Appreciate it.
Great to be on with you.
He wants to deal directly with the U.S. over the heads of the Ukrainians and over the heads of the Europeans. But as we know, first off, President Trump is not in a position to cut a deal with Putin because it's not his territory. It's not his country. It's Ukraine. So the Ukrainians have to agree if there's going to be any deal. I don't think Trump's going to be very satisfied with the conversation, but I also don't think that he's ready to pressure Ukraine to accept a bad deal like that.
Right. I mean, look, he would love to have something quickly over, but if there is some promise, they move forward. If there is no promise, they don't move forward and the sanctions come on. One of the tactical questions I have is, would you, if you're Trump, mention it ahead of time? And say, by the way, I'm going to tell them the Senate sanctions that have passed with 85 votes are going to go into play if I don't feel you sincerely are looking for a ceasefire and end to this conflict. Daniel Hoffman joins us now, knows Putin more than anyone else in this country, perhaps, maybe the world, former CIA station chief who used to call Moscow home. Dan, what do you expect to happen?
Yeah, look, I think there's going to be a frank exchange of views here, Brian. There's no question that the United States wants an end to this war. So does Ukraine. So does Europe. I think the only country that's demonstrated they don't want to end the war is Vladimir Putin. And I can tell you from experience that the intelligence community, the U.S. intelligence community, their input is critical. I expect that Director Ratcliffe and DNI Tulsi Gabbard are mounting their usual full-court press to ensure that the White House and President Trump are fully informed about what Putin expects to accomplish here. But what I think we're going to see is a lot of obfuscation from Vladimir Putin. I think he wants to split the war in Ukraine away from the overall U.S.-Russia bilateral relationship. He wants to deal with other issues like economic engagement and emerging from diplomatic isolation.
I'm fine with that, Dan. If you say, okay, let's talk economy. Okay, we'll take 45 minutes. Let's talk about the things that'll help you unmilitarize your economy, which is 45% military equipment. And then once they do that, say, okay, now let me tell you how you get there. And just flip it back, correct?
Yes, and arms control. There are a whole lot of issues. Sure. We should be talking to Russia, and that's a good thing. But the question is whether Putin is going to be at all sincere about ending the war.
Yep.
And look, Putin is a rational actor. We might not think of him as such because he's caused 1 million casualties for just his own country, let alone the death and destruction that he's caused in Ukraine. But from his perspective, it's rational. He's perfectly okay spilling massive bloodshed in Ukraine to fight this losing war because he believed Ukraine, as it's currently constituted as a free democracy, is an existential threat to Russia. He wants a puppet government, puppet regime in Kyiv. And that's the hurdle we're going to have to get over. There are many who believe that this war isn't going to end until Putin is no longer sitting in the Kremlin. I guess we'll get the answer to that, or at least the beginnings of that, on Friday.
So I think we're getting this. Caroline Levitt said, this is going to be a listening opportunity to hear where they stand. And then Marco Rubio said the president likes to look somebody in the eye. Everything about the president, domestically and internationally, is unorthodox. And I think people are used to that by now. But I'm just wondering if it hurts a negotiation to do it like this, because I also think, to a degree, Dan, that the KGB guy is used to being able to disseminate and do a 180 around their subject. Trump is not open to that. It's almost as if he's like, oh, yeah, you can do your profiles all you want, but this is what I want. So, yeah. And I know, we know the flattery thing. Okay. But that doesn't mean that's not going to work here.
Well, it didn't work in Hanoi in February of 2019.
You were
when
there.
President Trump met with Kim Jong-un. I was there, and President Trump walked away from a bad deal. Putin is trying his usual KGB tactics. He's talking about framing the war in Ukraine as a real estate deal, land swaps and things like that, which ignores the fact that Ukraine needs to have a fortified demarcation zone, the line of contact that exists right now, to deter any future Russian attack. So there's a lot of devil in the details. Yeah, in the old days, we used to work our way up with low-level meetings all the way up to the summit where we would accomplish something and sign some deals. President Trump likes to do it the reverse. And look, the other way wasn't working either. So now we'll see how this goes.
Yeah, I mean, it's the hope is if you get by Putin, there might be a Yeltsin who hardly traditional, obviously an alcohol problem, but was not looking to reconstitute the Soviet Union. How hopeful are you that after Putin, whenever that is, we get a different mindset?
Yeah, I'm not super hopeful. It's hard to be optimistic about Russia. Look, when the Soviet Union collapsed, it did present all sorts of opportunities. And the only piece of the Soviet Union that didn't collapse, and I can tell you because I spent a lot of time in Russia in the 1990s, was the KGB successor intelligence services that were surveilling us in Moscow and running high-profile spies like Rick Ames and Robert Hansen in the United States. So it wasn't a surprise to us that emerging from that post-Soviet apocalyptic wasteland would be the KGB guy, Vladimir Putin. I think if Putin goes, the guys who are currently the strongest, that's the Federal Security Service, which Putin used to lead, the FSB, those guys, the military, they're the ones most likely to take over for Putin and continue this hard line, unless they see that this war has been such a loser that there are opportunities for them economically to stop the aggression overseas, stop their alliance with China and North Korea and Iran, and open up to the West. There's always been that tension in Russia. The one thing I would caution for us in the United States, what really drove President Biden's presidency just completely to where he didn't want it to be and made him super unpopular was the way he handled Afghanistan. Americans wanted us out, but they were rightly critical of Biden for being just so feeble in the conduct of the withdrawal and just being unable to see the reality for what it was. Even days before the Taliban took Kabul, President Biden was still talking about how the Afghan army was going to hold strong. So that's the key for President Trump, I think, for him carrying on, his presidency with domestic and foreign priorities is how he will be perceived for handling Vladimir Putin. He's going to go do some serious negotiation on Friday, and the world, especially China, will be watching.
So Vladimir Putin had a phone call with Kim Jong-un yesterday. I'm sure the timing is intentional, where he thanked him for the use of his soldiers and in turn for the technological equipment they've given back. One of the bad parts from America's perspective, my perspective, yours, is that they have more of an open alliance, correct?
Yes, they do. And Vladimir Putin wants to make it clear to the United States that North Korea can be more of a thorn in our side, and so hence that discussion with Kim Jong-un didn't have to be publicized, but it was as a message to President Trump that Russia can deliver pain to the United States in the Pacific as well, and that's part of that, and part of the fact too that Putin wants to demonstrate that he's got some staying power in Ukraine with North Korean munitions and North Korean soldiers, cannon fodder. And some of the North Korean workers who have been helping to rebuild some of the areas in what used to be Ukraine and Russia has taken over.
Are you going to go, Dan?
I am not headed to Alaska this time, Brian, but who knows? Someday down the road I'll get a chance. I was in Helsinki for that summit, and it's always interesting to cover the summit like firsthand and be there in person. And I'm sure we're going to have great coverage from Fox News out there. I'm looking forward to commenting on it in the coming days.
Well, I think it's going to be interesting because from the European perspective, they're hoping to get their point across. What do you think? The way they act more at the traditional diplomatic handbook. What do you think? And they know the president now. They know they're not going to sit there and be dismissive like they were in 2017. What do you think the message they're going to give the president today when they have that meeting?
I think what they're going to say is that, look, please don't negotiate on Ukraine's behalf without them being there. The Russians have this great saying, "Без меня женили." I was married without being present. It's usually a saying that's reserved for the guys who have to go clear the mines in the Russian army, and they're sent to do that even though they didn't volunteer to do it. Ukraine's not at the table, and that's not a great look for us if the president makes a deal that's not considered to be very good for Ukraine and by extension Europe and us as well, since we enjoy $1 trillion worth of trade with Europe, and the last thing we want is for Putin to cast a dark shadow over that with threats to Europe if he were to take over Ukraine. So I think the president was right. President Trump was right to say he's going to be in listening mode. He's going to call Zelensky first. But it was clear Putin wasn't interested in meeting with President Trump and Zelensky to solve anything. And so that does put some limits on where we're going to be going here.
Yeah, and by the way, Vladimir Putin has sent about 110,000 soldiers into two separate areas at the front to try to make as much gains as possible before these talks start. In an odd, twisted way, is that some way of showing that maybe he knows a ceasefire could happen? Possible,
but also there are other reasons for doing this. We're headed into, we're in the summer fighting season. We've got, I don't know how long. It depends on the weather. A month, maybe 6 weeks before things start to get a little bit dicier for the Russians in their offensive. And so this is the time. It would be the time anyway for them to be launching the most assaults on Ukraine, and it's very much Putin's strategy. He hasn't let up at all. And had he been serious, perhaps, about negotiating with the president, maybe he would have agreed to a ceasefire until we have these discussions, even just a week or two. But he didn't do that either. So that clearly. The underlying point, too, for me, Brian, and I can't get past this, and forgive me because I served in Russia for a long time, and I spent a lot of time seeing the world through Putin's twisted KGB eyes. But Putin hates us. He hates President Trump. He hates Democrats. He hates Republicans. He hates our country, democracy, liberty, freedom, the Constitution, all those things. The last thing he wants is to elevate our status as the global superpower that stopped the largest land war in Europe since the Second World War. So I think what he wants is to show that he can assert his primacy over his own self-designated sphere of influence in the former Soviet Union. That's the challenge for President Trump, who, by the way, is trying to do the right thing and stop this bloody war. But the way to do it probably is to defeat Putin, not to negotiate with him. And that may be the conclusion we draw on Friday afternoon.
And I'm firmly in Ukraine's court, and if it means doubling, tripling down on the arms we give them, I'm all for that. I think I'm one of the minority listening to us right now, but I thoroughly believe it. Dan, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
All right. Have a good day.
We're in unprecedented territory. The law says he has 30 days unless the Congress passes a joint resolution to extend it. Because there is no real predicate, in our view, for a crime surge that caused the emergency, having the reasons to end the emergency are also unclear. So that's the conversation that I will have with the person that he has designated as his proxy to request these services, and that's the Attorney General Bondi.
So the mayor, who's been up and down with their description and just put out a statement earlier saying, I really like dealing with Attorney General Pam Bondi. He also was quoted as saying that the president's acting in a fascist tone. So which one is it? Bret Baier joins us now. And, of course, the mayor of D.C. now has about 800 more law enforcement agents, from National Guard to FBI agents, helping her out in a city that she says is doing fine. Bret Baier, what's the reality? I know you live in a couple of places and you spend a lot of time traveling. Bret Baier, you're chief political anchor at Fox News. Just in case you don't know, you have a book coming out. It's called Rescue the American Spirit, Teddy Roosevelt and the Birth of a Superpower. So, Bret, what's the reality when you talk to your friends and colleagues about crime in D.C.? What's your reality?
Yeah, I mean, here's the reality. I had a house that was just north of Georgetown in a really nice area called, Northwest, but it's a great area to live, and we obviously raised our family there. I now spend half the week here, and the family's down in Florida. But just to give you an example, like only a few months ago, midday, about 3 p.m., a guy 3 blocks from my house at the time was bumped from behind from another car, and he pulled over to, how you would do to get the insurance and deal with the accident, and 3 guys pop out of the car masked with guns and take his car, carjacked, and took his car away 3:00 in the afternoon in a really nice part of Washington, D.C. My point is that everybody has one of these stories. And, whether you're Republican or Democrat or independent, there are increasing issues with this kind of crime. Not only violent crime, but that kind of carjacking and also property crime. So everybody knows it. Democrats will tell it to you. I had Adrian Elrod on my show last night on Special Report saying, yeah, it is an issue. And so, for anybody who says that, it's just not necessary, a lot of people will tell you that they welcome the action. Now, how it lasts, where it goes from here, I think are all questions. Yeah,
and we'll see what happens with the increased presence, but I also hope they go into the more urban areas, the projects, the more rundown working class areas. Do you think
100%?
They will?
Yeah, that's where the real issue is. Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully that'll happen. But we do have these tragic situations that are happening in nice neighborhoods when Redskins running backs get shot on when they're trying to get their car out of valet. So we're seeing that happening. But Bret, it's kind of interesting because the mayor doesn't really know how to act. She's all over the place. One minute she's condemning, the next minute she's praising him. Do you think she's getting pressure from her own party?
I think so. I think she has to be, because her original initial statement was to welcome the cooperation and to praise the Attorney General for how they're working together, and to praise all of the leaders she was talking to. And then a day sort of transpired, and there was another message about authoritarian actions and worry about expansion.
Bret Baier with us now. And Bret, you're going to be going to Alaska, I understand. What is the schedule and what are you hearing? I know we're going to the U.S. The venue's going to be a military base, right?
Yeah, it'll be a military base in Anchorage. And, it's fascinating. I'll be traveling on Air Force One. I'll talk to the president on the way over there. And then we have a number of things on the ground, including doing my show, Special Report. But it is going to be fascinating to see exactly how he characterizes this and what comes out of it. We are working to try to get Vladimir Putin on, and we're in talks, believe it or not, with that. And we'll see. But there may be a joint press conference. We don't know because it's so fluid at this point. But I'll be on the trip.
Wow, that'd be interesting. Have you ever interviewed him?
Putin? No. I've had different officials from Russia on, including his big economic negotiator. But we aspire to have at least his individual reaction to what came out of the summit.
That'll be interesting. I'm trying to get a read, and we have President Trump on tomorrow on the radio show, which I know you'll be listening to. I'm trying to get a read on what Steve Witkoff learned from Vladimir Putin that made him call the president and say, it's worth your time. And I haven't gotten any specific thing. I heard about the swaps there's confusion on. What do you think what's behind Vladimir Putin going for this now?
I can't put a finger on it yet. I don't know if it's the initial to try to get to negotiating. I think it's bigger as far as, a trade situation with the U.S. to open up economic channels. I think that the efforts to pinch Russia may be having an effect, and they could step up. They could increase with another tariff on China in coming weeks for buying Russian oil. That's already happened, 25% more to India. Eventually, that hurts an economy that's already stressed in a number of different ways. So, it's interesting that both sides are also bringing their economic advisors, and maybe this is part of a big, broader deal that ties to that. But whatever happens, the Ukrainians have to be at the table to decide what they can or cannot do.
Absolutely. And the thing is, too, I understand there was a I guess a Zoom call with European leaders and Zelensky, and there's a protocol that they want to relay. They want to say you got to ask for it in a nice way. Trump doesn't take orders well. In a nice way, they say you got to have ceasefire and security guarantees 1 and 2. So what does that look like in reality?
Yeah, I mean, I really don't know. And I think, there's all kinds of people in Washington, Democrats and Republicans, who are skeptical about Putin, period, because he has a long history of dealing with things that have not panned out. And obviously the European leaders are worried that they agree to something and then, he tears it up in a year or two and then starts moving again. Yeah, and starts moving again. So hence the security guarantee.
All right, we'll see what's going to happen. But I just don't know, Bret, I know you have a lot of friends. I just don't know what ones are imaginary. So you could choose to tell me which aren't. But I found out that Chuck Schumer's got an imaginary friend. So what you're about to hear is John Oliver, who discovered it as well. And believe it or not, it's from my town of Massapequa again. Let's listen.
But you heard him. The Baileys have guided Chuck Schumer's political life, which is a little weird given they don't exist. Seriously, he invented them. But crucially, for all he talks about how much he loves the Baileys, they don't seem to return that love. Of the 6 votes the Baileys had across the last 3 presidential elections, 5 went to Donald Trump, most recently because of crime. They also think the civil rights movement went too far and aren't against immigration, just illegal immigration. And this is the couple who, in Chuck Schumer's own words, have guided his political life. And at this point, it might be worth asking, is that a good idea? Because the truth is, Schumer's devotion to his imaginary friends may help explain why he and the Democratic Party have been so underwhelming in recent years. Because he seems to be focusing a huge amount on the interest of the Baileys from Long Island, while forgetting other voters actually exist.
For example, I know people's heads are spinning now. They're saying, what am I talking about? I didn't know about this till I watched it. But this is what Chuck Schumer said about the Baileys, who don't exist, multiple times.
They're a middle-class couple in Massapequa, which is a suburb on Long Island.
Joe and Eileen Bailey, this middle-class couple, they bought into Reagan republicanism in 1980. Joe and Eileen are worried about losing their jobs or their friends' jobs.
The Baileys really don't believe in trickle-down. They don't believe in a whole lot of government spending, but they believe in tax breaks for kids to go to college.
He's an insurance adjuster and lives in the New York suburbs. By New York standards, he makes $50,000 a year. If he lived in the middle of the country, he'd make $40,000. Wife works in a medical office. She makes about $20,000. She might make $15,000 elsewhere.
Okay, so just keep in mind, none of that is real. Bret, I don't want to put you on the spot, but have you made things up in the past? Or are there your neighbors that don't exist? Has anything like this ever happened to you?
No, it's not. Listen, I saw that. I thought Oliver did an amazing job laying it out. I hadn't known any of that. I guess it's a story that first popped up years ago in the New Yorker, but really didn't get a lot of traction. But he continues to use the Baileys, and not in a broad way, but in a very specific way, like with very specific details. Like Joe stands up at the Rangers games and takes off his hat. She's very upset about problems in the school, and then goes into their kids, who then have names, who are also make-believe. It's very bizarre, and it's getting a lot of attention online. We're going to try to talk to the Senate Minority Leader at some point and see if we can turn a story about the Baileys.
And by the way, if there were Baileys, I would have bumped into them at Uncle Giuseppe's in Massapequa, but I was no one to bump into because they weren't there, even though
I get the point. He's trying to use this couple that votes different ways. They're really independent, but here's why they're a lodestar. But he could have said a make-believe family, but he uses them as real people.
Bret, it's just crazy between what's going on with the president. Every day is different, but it's definitely exciting. Lastly, any word about the Texas lawmakers coming back on the gerrymander? Because last night ABC was reporting they were going to go back home.
Yeah, we don't have word that that's happened yet. They did not get a quorum again today. I do think that the pressure is on both from the FBI and from Texas officials and where Governor Abbott is. I'm watching now the president at the Kennedy Center announcing the new Kennedy Center honorees. It is quite something to see him take control of kind of every aspect of Washington, D.C. Congratulations to Sylvester Stallone, a friend of ours, who is going to be an honoree, as well as Kiss. I mean, and Michael Crawford. I mean, you can see the song list already in President Trump's eyes of what he's going to hear in December.
Crazy times. But Sylvester Stallone, at one point, I was better friends with him than you. And that has totally turned on its head. Now it's Bret Baier and Brian Kilmeade an afterthought. So I don't know how I lost that friendship.
It's just proximity.
Right.
It's just proximity.
I mean, when I used to say, yeah, I know Sylvester Stallone, people say, Brian, you're making that up. Little do we know that I was actually telling the truth, and Chuck Schumer was making up somebody in my own town.
It's not the Baileys.
It's absolutely not. Hey, I cannot wait for your book that can be pre-ordered now, To Rescue the American Spirit, Teddy Roosevelt, and the Birth of a Superpower. Bret?
Yeah, really psyched about it.
It's great.
It's going to be good.
Yeah, it's really great, and we love Teddy Roosevelt. Thanks so much, Bret.
See ya.
I'm going to be speaking about Teddy Roosevelt on the 23rd of August. Fox Nation's going to stream his Saturday night. History, Liberty, and Laughs. And also Sam Houston, The Alamo Avengers, appropriately. I'll move that up on the list, even though it's the fourth history book. And I'm going to bring history to life, and we're going to have a great time. I'll see everybody in Dallas. BrianKilmeade.com.
This is serious stuff.